What is up, guys? Clay Enjoyer here, and it is time to enjoy. And in this video, I made a space marine. Why? Because we need to burn the heretic, kill the mutant, and purge the unclean. To give my space marine a cooler stance, I can bend his leg on an aluminum foil rock before then bulking up his body in 2 metric tons worth of aluminum foil, because canonically space marines are 7 feet tall monsters. Then I could build up the space marine's body with copious layers of clay before then bending the arms into an appropriate shape, which will be holding a bolter in one hand and a chainsword in the other. To make sure that the Space Marine's arms are the same thickness, I can build them up with some clay like the rest of the body to give them some more accurate proportions. With most of the clay blocked out to start with, I can smooth it out to make it look a little less messy and a bit more pristine. Which, now that I think about it, if this layer of the Space Marine's armor wasn't actually that smooth, I feel like that might be more accurate since they're through a bunch of battles and such. But I didn't really think of that because I thought that it looked better when it was smooth either way. With the body smooth enough, I can put some extra clay on the leg because I thought it was looking a little bit too rounded and I wanted to make sure the knee was a little bit more defined. With the body proportioned and smoothed enough, I can add some lines around the joints to act as the under armor for the Space Marine, around the knees, hips, and then a little bit on the stomach too. Then I can use some isopropyl alcohol to smooth out some of the egregious cuts and make it look a little bit more smooth, or at least as smooth as I can get it. Next, I can give the Space Marine some boots and a little bit of clay to blend them into his feet before then starting to work on the first of the metal plates on his legs, which can then be blended and smoothed in place. Then the legs get even more armor with the addition of another plate. If anyone is curious for how long this process or other processes for my videos take, all these plates took around 15 minutes to bake and 30 minutes-ish to cool, even with a fan. And yeah, I may start going insane from how long this process is taking. Then, to match the rest of the legs, I can put more plates on the lower legs, following another thinner plate on each, before then carving in the extra detail on the bottom thin plate. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but I guess it's maybe something important. I don't really know. Then I can cut out the last piece of the leg armor, which also covers a bit of the knee. To make it fit a little better, I can bend and curve the armor piece slightly to give it a more adequate shape. Now I can start to work on the feet, which starts out with a rectangle of clay on each foot, followed by 2 round balls on each side, which I guess is a lot of ankle protection, but also these are super soldiers, so I'm not arguing. Then I can add the ball to the knee that I accidentally forgot, and blend and smooth that in to make it look like this was added earlier and not later. Then I can cut in some beefy treads to build up the boots and make them look a little thicker. Now with the lower body done, I can start building up the Space Marine's upper body with a banana hammock and some clay blended in to act as a piece of armor, before then adding some more clay to act as another piece of armor for the chest, because our Space Marine is going to need a bunch of protection when fighting against the Tyranids, green orc boys, and then the space communists, or Tau if you're a nerd. To make room for the Space Marine's head, I can carve a roughly even circle in the top of this new sheet of clay, and then give him a nice big turtleneck. With the Space Marine looking extra fashionable, I noticed a blank spot on his chest, and thought this would be a perfect place for the Emperor's Aquila, but instead of a double-headed gold eagle, I'm gonna give a skull with wings, which according to Google is an imperialis. Now with the wings looking like wings and the skull looking like a skull, I can attach them together and put them on the Space Marine's chest with a symbol of pride and power. Now, to finish off the Space Marine's chest, I can give him some weird line things that go under his arms, and then a nice belt with a cool belt buckle in the middle. Now I can finally start to make the Space Marine's armored arms, with obviously sheets of clay like the rest of the body, before then getting built up and elbow pads added. Like I said at the start of the video, when I decided what the arms would be holding, I decided that the left one would be holding a chainsword. So this is what I'm making here, which like everything else starts out as a sheet of clay, and then spikes can be carefully placed to make it look like it's supposed to. Then I can wrap the blade of the chainsword in another layer of clay, making it a spiky hot dog, before then giving it a handle and a little bit of extra clay on the side to make it look a little bit more cool, I guess. Then, like I said earlier just moments ago, I can add said details to the handle to make it look a bit cooler. Now, since I'm trying my absolute hardest to get away from having to do the hands, I can start by giving the Space Marine a teeny tiny little backpack, which will make room for his big massive generator, which is this cardboard clay abomination you see here. Even though abomination is viewed as heresy, so if the Inquisition comes after me, I won't be surprised. Then I can smooth this clay sheet into a flat-bottomed-ish arrow, but even though it's kind of thick, so I'll build it up later, and then add some vents to the side to match with the art. To make this arrow look a little more interesting, I can add a circle and then some more little rectangles of clay around the sides, followed by a hot dog that is only slightly overhanging to act as whatever the generator part is. I'm just following the references. I'm not sure really what this is. To finish off the biggest part of the generator, I can attach 2 circles on either side, followed by 2 flattened balls, which will become the big vents on top. And then I can add a worm of clay around it to try and give it a bit of a border. And then I can work on making those smaller side vents that I had mentioned earlier, before then attaching them to place along with 2 smaller panels on the sides to make the backpack look a little bit less flat and a bit more interesting. Now, to finish off the generator, I can add a big slab of clay, which then gets holes poked into it, and then I can place it on around the top of the generator to make it look like it has a bit more armored protection. With the Space Marine's backpack finally finished, I can start making the weapons. But if you remember, I already made the chainsword. So now, the other weapon that's going to go in his hand is a flamer, which I can start by making the barrel before shoving it into a big rectangle-ish handled piece of clay. Then, like the Space Marine's backpack, I can poke a bunch of holes into another sheet of clay, which will be layered on top of the flamer to give it a little bit more armor-ish metal, I suppose. Then I can get the underside of the barrel with the weird textured rectangles, and then a little lighter underneath for if this flamer was actually a real flamer, then duh, flames would come from it. Then I can attach a little bit of wire followed by another bit of clay to act as the fuel source instead of it being like attached to the backpack. Then I can attach another bit of clay to act more like the references, but now that I think about it, this looks like a pretty weird shape. Then I can add some extra details all around the sides to make it look more interesting before blending in some more clay to, well, you guessed it, make it look more interesting. With both the Space Marine's weapons done and the hands not due to procrastination, I can start by working on the helmet, which starts by smoothing a bit of clay where the helmet face part will be, because I don't want to use a second piece of clay. Then I can blend some extra clay in to make the eyes more defined, and then I can have some breathing ports on the sides. And in battle, the Space Marine needs to hear orders, so I'm giving him some ears, which are these thin sheets of clay on the sides, and then adding some tubes for whatever reason, but it does look cool. Then, to finish off the helmet, I can give him some back of the head banding to make sure that everyone knows that this is a cool Space Marine, along with the top two. Then I can blend in some different clay around the eyes, which will be a surprise for later, but it is cool and you really want to watch to the end. Well, it's still a cool effect anyway, it's just not at the end, and this could be really spooky. And since the Space Marine's helmet was just a little bit too big, I needed to give him a new turtleneck, so sadly I had to take apart the old one to give him a nice new one. Now with the little neck in place, the head looks great. Now I can finally start to make the hands, which start out as two roughly even blobs of clay, which then get fingers carved into them as well as a thumb, and then they can get blended in to make it look a little bit more smooth. And to finish off the chainsword, I can give the Space Marine a little arm guard, and then I can essentially do the same process on the Space Marine's hands that are going to be holding the flamer. But since the hands were looking a little squished, I built up some clay on either hand to make them look a little thicker and a little less rectangular. Now, for the final step to making the Space Marine, I can smooth out this oddly shaped piece of clay, trying to keep it as even as possible, and then giving it some trim to add as the giant pauldrons or shoulder plates for the Space Marine. I figured even though the plates are wonky, that's fine because these are battle ready and have been used a bunch, so it makes sense. Then I can put the pauldrons loosely in place and gather all the pieces I need, which will be ready and needed to be painted and primed. Starting with the head. Oh wait, I almost forgot. I need to give this Space Marine a little bit of battle damage, and then I will do the painting and the priming, because I want to make the Space Marine look like he's been through some stuff. And I also don't think it would be very realistic if Space Marine armor wasn't at least slightly damaged, because from obviously battling all the heretical evils of the galaxy, I imagine there would be a bit of damage. But there's one problem. The Space Marine is standing on an aluminum foil rock. That can't slide, so I'm going to start building up this body with aluminum foil, which will then be the eventual Space Communist or Tau. To make this Smurf Tau look like an actual soldier, I need to give him some arms, which start out as these worms of clay that then can be textured by giving them a bunch of lines into them to make it look like stretched and pulled clothing. Just like the source material that I found, I can give the Tau some wrist guards and shoulder plates, which are probably a little thicker than they should be, but it's too late now and I think it looks good. And then I can give the soldier some little hands on his little arms, with a teeny tiny little plate on them to protect them. I don't even know what they would really need to protect them from that little damage, but I guess it makes the model a little bit more interesting. Now at this point, I hope you guys were wondering, where is his bottom half? And I'm going to answer that question right now. So I'm actually going to leave his bottom half exposed, like, I don't know, some kind of burrito accident. so his organs will be spilling out all over the ground where the eventual base will be. How fantastic. Then I can give the Tau soldier's skin a lot of cuts and battle damage to make it look like this Space Marine went insano on the Tau soldier's abdomen. Then I can start building the Tau's head, which starts as a rectangular blob of clay, and then some eyes can get poked into them, followed by eyeballs, and then their weird mouth and eyelids, and then, for whatever reason, they also have this giant slit in their head. I assume that's like a coin slot, but Warhammer has never officially said that, so I guess I'm not sure though, but I'd like to think so. Now with the head done, I can add a little neck off camera that's hard to see, and then I can blend the head in, but with my big fingers you can barely tell what I'm even doing. Now with the soldier done, the Space Marine can stand on his vanquished enemy, and now it's time to making a base, which, for cool reasons and aesthetics, is a circle, because everyone knows circles are cooler than squares. Then I can carve some lines in to act as big paving stones and smooth it out to make them look a little bit more defined. To make the stone look a little less buttery smooth, I can run over it with an aluminum foil hot dog to give it some extra textures. Then with my knife I can cut in some random scratches to make it look like there is damage to the concrete circle, and then I can do the same thing for smaller chunks to act as extra debris around the Space Marine and to make the base look a little bit more interesting like seen now. Now finally I can move on to spray painting it and to prime it, including the base and all of the characters and all the parts. Now, one of the most exciting parts of this entire video is finally starting to paint, which obviously is going to be the black noodly Under Armour because it's the darkest color. Then I can start by painting the armor a lightish green or darkish green. I don't really basing this off of anything. This was just the coolest thing that I came up with, and also because I was kind of running low on different paints, so I had to work with what I had. I guess the Space Marine kind of looks like a salamander, and I guess that is what I'm going for, but not really, because they look a bit different and the color is a bit of a different shade. But, I don't know. It's still cool. Since I'm so good at color matching, and because of my dwindling supplies, I had to settle on this different shade of green, which everything will eventually be painted, but I just wanted to tell you guys. Then I can paint the treads black before then moving on to painting the Aquila a nice bright gold to really draw your eyes towards it and catching it, like, because I don't want to drop it, duh. And then I can paint some other gold pieces, well, gold, to act as an accent color and make it look a little bit more pleasing and interesting to look at. That and also painting gold is really fun. Then I can paint a lot of other details gold to the point that it's probably a bit excessive. At least the enemies of the Imperium will be able to see this Space Marine from 3 miles away from the bright colored armor along with all the gold accents. Then I can paint the Space Marine's belt a nice dark brown. Before then painting the majority of the chainsword and the flamer in a dark metallic gunmetal gray. But because I want this gun and sword to look a little bit more interesting, I'll give it some silver accents to make it look a little bit more pleasing and I guess a little bit less single colored. And to make the teeth of the chainsword stand out a lot, I can give it a very bright silver, and then I can try and make a rough transition on the plate of the flamer between the green and the gold on the armor. Then I can use a lighter green and dust it on to the rest of the armor all over to make it look like it's been through some stuff and it has a little bit of wear and tear, before then doing the same thing on the belt, as well as the under armor. Then, to make the gold look a little less pristine and to give it a little bit more shadows and definition, I can paint on a nice thin brown wash on all the gold bits to give it a little bit more depth. And to make sure all of the armor is the same, I can do the same thing with a light gray on all the black pieces to make them look dirty and well used, just like the gold, before then doing the same thing on the mohawk of the Space Marine, as well as the chainsword and the gun. Now, with all of the parts of the Space Marine finally finished, I can start gluing them together, starting with his cool helmet, then his big pauldrons, then the massive backpack, then the flamer, then the chainsword. Now with the Space Marine finally finished, I can start by painting the Tau soldier a nice bright blue, which will eventually be toned down a bit, followed by a coat of black paint on the Tau's soldier's under armor, and then a tan color on the breastplate, shoulder pads, elbow pads, and the wrist brace things. Since the Imperium of Man can't get its soldiers out of the spotlight, I can repaint the damage with a black for the surface level damage because I had forgotten to paint that earlier. Now the Space Marine is absolutely covered in battle damage and wear and tear. So I want to give some of the damage a silver in the middle to act like it's deeper damage instead of surface level. Then I can go back to the Tau soldier to paint the alien scum's organs a bright pink. Even though technically this is an alien, and aliens' organs probably aren't the same color as human organs, but I just thought it would be a nice gross color in place of, like, I don't know, green or something. Now I can make the skin extra dark and beaten up to make it look, well worn. Then I can do some dry brushing on the armor to make it look worn too, and some very heavy dry brushing to bring out the shadows and crease lines in the armor, the shirt, and the organs. With the Heretic finished, it's finally time to make the base, which starts out as gray, which then gets a thick black wash to highlight some of the cracks, crevices, and damage. And even though I did a too much primer, it kind of hides the original damage, but that's okay. Then I can paint the wires with a rust to make them look like they've been a while, even though if this was realistic, they would probably still be the same metal color, but it looks more interesting from a creator's perspective. Now, with the base done, the Tau done, and the Space Marine done, I can put them into place, and it's time for the reveal. Oh wait, except there's one more thing I wanted to add, which is a little bit of blood spilling out of the Tau's organs. And I know I said this earlier, but red blood isn't realistic for an alien, but who cares? If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for some more alien heretic purging content. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.